Well, we're back in the pilot lounge again today, and I'm just going through a list of odd things that have happened to me in my flight training and all, military, civilian, airline, whatever. And I remember one thing when I was in flight training at Jackson, Michigan, and we're flying RAF J3 Cubs, still had the British insignia on the fuselage. And the instructor I had could never talk in a normal voice. He had to scream and yell. That was always particular with military flight instructors. I don't know where these guys got it. They thought they could teach you better if they're screaming and yelling at you. Well, we're flying along and all of a sudden he pulls the throttle back. He says, emergency landing. So what you're supposed to do then is pick out a good field. It's not too dangerous. And with the engine throttled back and no thrust, you're supposed to go in and land, make an approach on that field. And then once the instructor determines that you can make it safely, he says, okay. He shoves the throttle forward and says, go around, we're going to go up again. Well, we were coming in on this nice field, emergency landing field at that time. And he says, he said, okay, push the throttle forward, we're going up again. He says, you missed that. I missed it. How? He screams and yells. You didn't see that fence ahead of you? He says, I'm going to show you something. Give me those controls. He grabs the control wheel, wheels around again, makes an approach, comes right down off of the grass, gets close to the fence, and he says, now watch this. And he pulls the stick back and then pushes it forward. So the airplane wheels hit the ground and he bounced over the fence. I couldn't believe it. He said, see, why did you do that? Then we stuck in the mud on the other side. He came in, pow. The airplane wouldn't move. And then he starts yelling at me, you tell anybody about this, I'm going to wash you out. You're being done as far as an Air Force pilot. So I kept my mouth shut. A couple of farmers came over, brought a tractor, they pulled us out, got us back on the other field. They had about 5 guys that had to lift the airplane over the fence, get it back to where we could take off. And so the first thing we did when he landed at the airport, he ran and got a hose and washed the mud off the wheels. So that's one of the odd things that happened. But once I got overseas, this is in 1944, I was in a B-29 outfit, and as a gunner, because I was moving out of flight training, I went in, lied about my age, and when they found out I was not even 17 years old yet, they gently escorted me out. They said, you have to be at least 18. You're okay to be a pilot, but not okay to be an officer and a gentleman, meaning you're a second lieutenant. And so we were on Tinian Island, and we just got there, and then the first thing, because there were still bombing raids from the Japanese in the other islands, first thing we had to dig a community foxhole that we could jump into when the siren went off. And I made a big mistake. Here's how you learn in the military. Okay, this is on this is December 24, the night before Christmas Eve. The siren went off. We're undergoing an air raid. Look up and all the searchlights are gone and you hear the roar of the Japanese airplanes overhead. So I came out of my tent. I was always a fast runner. I beat everybody to that foxhole. I jumped in the foxhole. That was a big mistake because about 3 big guys that weren't very fast jumped in on top of me. So that's a hard lesson I learned in the military. So when the next air raid siren came on, I waited, let these big guys get in there first, and jumped up on top of them. So some of the lessons, the tough lessons that you learn in the military, the painful way. And years ago in the 1950s, I noticed there's an ad in the paper and also got a letter. Eastern Airlines was hiring down in Miami. And I called them, they sent me a ticket, and a friend of mine who was a mechanic I was at Whiskey Strip then, my little airport I was running out in Copley, and he was a mechanic there, and he wasn't a handsome individual. He's one of these guys with a kind of a sad face and a sad jug ears and all that. And wonderful guy. And he'd also been a pilot in the military. He's a co-pilot on a B-29, and he had a lot of flying hours. But he couldn't stay in the military because at that time, the Air Corps didn't need any more second lieutenant pilots. And so he refused to take a reduction and be an enlisted man to stay in. So he went to work as a mechanic. He'd been trained as a mechanic also. An excellent individual. Well, good pilot. He had a lot of flight time, a lot of big flight time. And I was the first one to be interviewed by the chief pilot. And he looked at all my records and everything, and it took me over to a room for an instrument flight check on a simulator. Only they were called traders then, the old late trader. And I sailed through that, went back into the chief pilot's office, and he hired me. And he says, next, you go see the personnel manager, and he'll set all the paperwork up. So, okay, I went back there, and I was talking to the personnel manager, and the guy had a little Adolf Hitler mustache. And he had his bald spot with the hair combed over the top, and he looked down at me, you know, and like he was sniffing something. And I knew this is not going to be a good interview. And I says, well, the chief pilot hired me. He says, the chief pilot recommends I hire. And he says, you are not qualified to be an American or an Eastern Airlines pilot. I got up, went back to the chief pilot. Chief pilot came in, and he said, this man is well qualified. He even passed the instrument exam. Okay, I went back to the hotel, and my friend was following me. This was before I went back to the hotel. He followed me in for the interview. He got hired by the chief pilot, goes into the personnel director. The guy gave him the same thing. And he says he knew right away that this guy's going to be trouble. He had that superior tone. And he said he put his nose up in the air and he looked down at him. He slammed the folder shut. Says, oh, my good fellow. He had a British accent too, which is fake. That's how these guys, they think they gain, people will listen to him more if they have a British accent. So he looked down at the man, slammed the folder shut, and he says, my good fellow, I'm sorry, but here at Eastern Airlines, we can't use you. The guy said, what? What do you mean? The chief pilot hired me? I took the instrument test. He looked at my log books. I'm well qualified, he said. He said, yes, but Captain Eddie Rickenbacker, who owned the airline at that time and started it, wanted his pilots to look like Hollywood leading men. And he says, you do not qualify for that, young old fellow. He says, in fact, I would judge you as being too ugly to fly for Eastern Airlines. And my friend leaped over the desk, grabbed him, pulled him halfway across, gave him about 3 good shots. And then they arrested my friend. He's in jail, and we're going to go back to Akron together, so I waited for him. He got 4 days in jail, and they apologized to him profusely. They paid his medical bill. They paid for his airline back. They gave him some money to keep quiet about it. But I could not believe it when he told me. He didn't look like a Hollywood leading man, as we want all of our pilots to look like. And they told him he's too ugly to be an Eastern Airlines pilot. So he went to work at Whiskey Strip when I was renting the place. He was the manager of the shop, and he worked on airplanes. He kind of kept to himself. But I warned everybody, whenever you're around him, never mention Eastern Airlines or he'll part your hair with a wrench. Because he was really bitter about the whole thing, which you can't blame him. Now, one time, when I go to these, in fact, I'm going to give a talk down November 7th on Veterans Day at the University of Akron ROTC unit down in Orrville, Ohio. And the title of the talk is the one I've given several times now, The American Soldier. But they said there's going to be a lot of veterans there. When veterans come in and watch these things, everybody's referred to as a hero, whether they just cleaned out, did wash the dishes, or flew an airplane. They're all heroes. Well, really they are, because they gave up 3 to 4 years of their lives to serve in the military, regardless of how they served. But anyway, my talk is almost a hero I'm going to give on that, as well as the American soldier. And I'm going to say when it came to be a hero, I didn't make the cut. Now I'm going to tell you why. When we landed on Tinian Island, I was a gunner on a V-29, and the island had been secured, but the Japanese had retreated into the high sugarcane fields, and then they went into the caves. And they would come out every so often. They would not use guns because of the gunshot would alert the Marines to where they were. So they'd use knives. And one night, the enemy soldiers came out, and there was 9 P-51 pilots that were sleeping next to their airplanes. They'd landed at Tinian Island for gas, and they were going up to Iwo Jima. And 9 were killed in one attack. So everybody was really jittery about that. And so what happened, even though the Marines were in Jeeps, and they had caliber 30 machine guns on their Jeeps, and they could complete and continually patrolled the flight line. But still, every member of the crew had to take a turn guarding the airplane also. Because we had these revetments where they parked the airplanes with a tail first, and then razor wire, rolled barbed wire protecting the airplanes on the flight line. And then beyond that was the high sugarcane crops. The Japanese raised sugarcane, but then after the invasion, we conquered Tinian, the sugarcane was left untended. So they came out of that, and so I was issued, every 10th man in the Air Corps at that time was issued a Thompson submachine gun. And I thought, boy, this is really something. I remember those machine guns, those Thompsons, from the old gangster movies back in the 29s and the 30s. I said, boy, this is really something. Until I carried that thing with plus 90 rounds of ammunition for 3 days in 100-degree heat. I didn't think very much of a Thompson submachine gun. But anyway, my turn came up to guard the B-29. And I went there about 11 o'clock, and I was supposed to stay there till about 7, until I was relieved by another crew member. And then, of course, the whole flight line came alive. And I was sitting with my back against the nose wheel, and I'm trying to stay awake, because falling asleep was bad in a combat area. You could be court-martialed and spend life in prison for that. And in some areas, if they're fighting, and you fell asleep, or whatever, if you could fall asleep, then you'd be court-martialed, and you could be hanged, according to the Articles of War. So I was trying to jerk my head up and down, trying to stay awake. Then I heard sounds coming from the sugarcane field. Something is coming through the sugarcane field. I heard some things like heavy breathing and some grunts and all. Uh-oh, Japs. I should say Japanese soldiers, enemy soldiers coming through, and they're getting closer. And I rolled over, took the safety off of the Thompson. I went over a little bit toward the sugarcane field, toward the barbed wire, and the grunts and the noises were getting closer. And I put 90 rounds into that sugarcane field. By the time the first clip went down, the Marines had converged on that area with spotlights, and I pointed, enemy in the sugarcane field. And a grizzled old Marine sergeant, gunnery sergeant, took charge, set up for a perimeter. They blew a hole in the barbed wire. They went in there. They came out, and the Marine gunnery sergeant was smiling. He put his arm around my shoulder. He said, "Sarge, good shooting. You got 6 of them." Wow. I thought, boy, now I could envision the colonel pinning a medal on me for protecting the whole flight line. The sergeant started laughing. He says, The only problem is you got 6 Japanese pigs. And, but he says, still, good shooting. Anyway, the Marines there, and Marines really started in on me. Hey, can you make me a ham sandwich? I like ham and eggs for breakfast. And they finally quieted the Marines down. He said, you know what? You're in a brand new airplane. The other airplanes have got bombs up and painted on the nose, or a rising sun flag where they shot down a Japanese airplane, or the bomb represented a mission. You don't have anything on your nose. He said, but I've got a good buddy, and he's a good painter, and he'll do it for free if I ask him. He'll paint 6 pigs on the nose of your airplane. And then he said, what's that hiss? He didn't have to tell me. I shot out the left outboard tire on the left outboard landing gear. Each landing gear had 2 big tires. And oh, what jail am I going to spend the rest of the war? And I shot out our own airplane tires. And these guys are laughing. He said, oh, we'll paint a tire up there too for you. So you got 6 pigs and 1 tire in one night. Then I got relieved. I went back to the tent. In the morning, somebody was shaking me, a master sergeant, woke me up and he says, the colonel wants to see you right now. Here it comes. Well, I'm going to take it like a man. So I have being my best military bearing. So I walk into the tent. We didn't have anything set up yet. The colonel's command tent, a lot of enlisted people were working there. As soon as I walked in with the master sergeant, they all looked up at me. Everybody in the place, all the people doing the paperwork, and they were shaking their heads like, like I'm going to be hanged or something. So I go in there, and the colonel was sitting at his desk looking at a folder. He looked up at me, slammed the folder shut, and said, that's bad. But I said, my military bearing. I saluted him. The colonel, Stadvik Ernest, Sergeant, reporting for duty, sir. He says, relax, cut that out. He says, I'm going to commend you, Sergeant, for your shooting. He says, that could have been a Japanese force coming down out of the caves and completely wiping out our flight line. Now, for your alertness, he says, I commend you. But he said, in the interest of the safety of all the personnel in my command, I'm going to take away your Thompson submachine gun and issue you a baseball bat. I like that kind of stuff. He said, but don't worry, he says, you'll go down in military history as the first American soldier sent into combat with a baseball bat. Then he starts laughing. He said, now get out of here and help change that tire. Everybody in the whole place was laughing. So I went back to my tent, my bunk. There's a baseball bat laying on the Marines put that there. Anyway, well, thanks. We're going to see you again. Remember to come in, sit down, talk with us, have a cup of coffee in the pilot lounge.